set up something harder. You can see he's looking to set up. And that time it was a big left uppercut underneath.
Stop! Box!
Right hook scores for Dan.
Now that was a clean punch, but not a lot of effect. And the reason for it, as Cano trips to the ground and the referee says no knockdown, he's going to wipe the gloves now. The reason you just saw a moment ago that right hook land from Dan on the chin or the side of the face of Cano and it wasn't effective, he did not turn it over. Again, he slaps with that punch, does the man in blue.
They trade here at the end of the third round, and JoJo Dan getting the best of it. An offensive spurt. Both men bloodied as we come to the end of round number 3.
Pretty good list there. Canadian Fight Club. Ivan Durrell, George Chavallo, tough son of a gun. The Hilton family, 2 of them being represented. Davey Hilton Jr., then later on Matthew Hilton, of course Arturo Gatti, Otis Grant, Eric Luca, who's been on our air plenty of times, the former world champion.
JoJo Dan opens up with a left hand here against Ricardo Cano. Left hand scores again from Dan. He's in the blue trunks. Tries to sneak that right hook in. Sends a left to the body. And JoJo Dan smoking early here in the 4th round. He threw 24 punches in the opening 30 seconds. Trying to get around that guard to the body. Goes up top with a right hand. Squared up right in front of each other now. See that list of Canadian fighters. Arturo Gatti on that list. Snapping that jab. Teddy's scorecard. First 3 rounds go to JoJo Dan. And I think there's some fans new to the sport that think that he's a Jersey guy, but Friday Night Fights was up here back in the day covering Arturo Gatti, packing him in Montreal. Punch track numbers in real time. Dan landing 98 and counting now. He has already landed 21 here in this 4th round. Another clash of heads on the inside as Ricardo Cano came in behind the jab with a right hand, fell forward.
Sometimes you lay back, as Cano is doing, because you're a counterpuncher. And you wait for your opponent to make mistakes, kind of like the spider luring the beetle into the den. But Cano is not laying back because his strength is to counter. He's laying back because he is unsure of himself. He right now is not sure of how to approach the undefeated Dan. Now you see an effort from Cano trying, just by coming forward, nothing fancy, a lot of big shots, a lot of wide shots, but not a lot of landing from Cano.
Good left hand there, and Cano stumbles back. And now JoJo Dan trying to place his punches.
Now would be a good time, as you suggested, for Dan to place something downstairs. Cano in survival mode, moving his head, trying to avoid whatever comes at him. No better time to go to the body than now for Dan.
End of round 4. Earlier tonight, we pay tribute to Diego Chico Corrales, who lost his life in a tragic accident earlier this week. Teddy, when you think of Diego Corrales, you think of the sensational fight, the fight of the year type fight. And we asked you to put together your list of the all-time greatest fights, because you know Chico Corrales is going to end up on that list. So let's take a look at Teddy Atlas's all-time greatest fight list.
I wish Chico was still with us to see this, but he belongs on the top of that list, I believe. You don't get much better than that fight. Then Bobby Chacon and Bose Edwards, the second one, they had plenty of great fights. And, of course, Bazooka Lamone was around those times. He was involved in some fights with those guys. Archie Moore, 45 years old. He comes off the floor 3 times in the first round to knock out Ivan Durrell, who's 29 years old. Mickey Ward, Gaddy, Rocky Graziano, somebody up there likes me. Muhammad Ali, Joe Frazier, Thrill in Manila, Larry Holmes, and Ken Norton. Both fighters took different directions from that fight. That's what made Larry Holmes. It was a 15-round fight. A lot of people forget how great that 15th round was and how great that fight was.
Round 5, Ricardo Cano was hurt. He's in the white trunks at the end of that 4th round. Jojo Dan finding his groove here in his 5th round yet again. You know, I have no problem with Chico Corrales and Castillo being number 1 on that list at all. The more you watch that fight, the more you appreciate it. It was just unbelievable. You know, Teddy, when I think about Chico this week, and I think about all the attention that went to De La Hoya Mayweather last week from the mainstream media and the fans that maybe haven't been watching boxing in recent years. You know what I wish? I wish they had watched Chico Corrales in recent years, those same fans that were coming back to the sport this past weekend. Instead of watching De La Hoya Mayweather, I wish they watched Castillo Corrales.
Well, the good thing about that is, as we were saying in our testament to Chico Corrales before early in the night, those fans will always have a chance to look at Chico Corrales, look back on that special night, how he chose to behave that night like a pretty special person.
Cano missing with 3 consecutive punches as Jojo Dan able to slip underneath. Doubles up that right hand to the body and then fired off the uppercut to Dan. 1-2, classic combination, straight left hand scores and doubles up that right jab. Back to it now is Dan.
Even though it's been all one way, at least on our scorecards, and that one way has been in the favor of the local undefeated Dan. Dan doing a little bit of heavy breathing. Maybe just from being in a situation where he has to deal with somebody who does not want to go away. Cano, you would think the conditioning would be pretty good, Joe. He's coming in the lightest weight in 2 years and 3 months.
Came in at 144. He most recently weighed 147. First fight outside of Mexico for Cano. Cano and Dan coming to the end of round number 5. Wednesday night fights from Montreal. Darlington Speedway. That's the next stop for the NASCAR Busch Series. Carl Edwards going to try to extend his points lead. He's at NASCAR's well-known track, Darlington. NASCAR Busch Series at Darlington, presented by Coleman on ESPN2 Friday at 8 Eastern. And then we're going to be following that up with Friday night fights. Kelvin Davis going heavyweight. Former cruiserweight titleist stepping up to face Terry Smith on Friday night fights. Next week on Wednesday night fights, Glenn Johnson against Montel Griffin. And we will be coming to Montreal twice in June for ESPN Boxing. 2 Friday night fights, and they are good ones. Jean Pascal undefeated against Ruben Williams, and Randall Bailey against Herman Ngojo. That's on June 8th. And then June 15th, Lucian Butte against Sakio Bika. So top action here in Montreal. We have enjoyed our visits here in recent years, and such was the case tonight with the main event and the showcase of Adrian Diacono. And now Teddy Atlas will look at your scorecard and getting a good look at another undefeated Montreal-based fighter in the blue trunks is Jojo Dan, up 5-0 on your scorecard.
Dan not in possession of a lot of power. But what he is in possession of is an understanding that defense should be part of his makeup. Defensively responsible. As a matter of fact, defensively, he has been creating opportunities for himself offensively as he makes right here for no miss and comes back and picks spots.
Good work with the jab there. You can see him covering up and giving good head movement.
He understands the always importance, or the all-important